Well, good morning. I'm Jeff Coleman.
And I'm Deborah Pinkerton. Welcome to Morning Light.
In just a minute, our Morning Light panel will tackle a challenging topic in our headlines.
But first, here's a preview of what's coming up later in the show. March is Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month. It is the second deadliest cancer in the United States, but it is highly preventable. We will talk to a doctor about the importance of screening and ways you can take action to stop the disease. Plus, meet a Pennsylvania man who was diagnosed with the disease at age 31. Hear how his health battle helped to strengthen his faith.
Very encouraging story.
It is.
Well, tomorrow marks the 5th anniversary of President Donald Trump's declaration of a national emergency on the novel coronavirus disease, or COVID-19. In many ways, that marked the beginning of the most significant disruption of life for Americans, changing how we work, how we shop and learn, even worship. Add to this the tragic deaths of over 1 million Americans.
Yeah, that was an amazing time.
Does it feel like 5 years or does it feel like 50?
It feels like 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely does. It definitely changed a lot of things,
It sure
I think,
did.
in our society. Well, COVID exposed deep lines of political division and mistrust of government leaders. It created new heroes and villains, and grassroots movements were formed at the state and federal level. But it also revealed what experts called an epidemic of loneliness. Millions of Americans connected by social media, but isolated from in-person community like church services replaced by virtual gatherings. I know for our church, we would be outside during the summer and we sat on the lawn for a service.
Kind of like a car drive-in.
Yeah. But outside it was nice.
Yeah.
Well, in one moment, America was resilient and strong. In the next moment, weakened in new ways.
And as much as we don't want to believe it, there will be another trial in the American story, perhaps another virus or a test of our economic or military strength. The question is, are we ready? So for the panel this morning, we've got three big questions. Number one, is our post-pandemic faith stronger or weaker? Number two, does the famous American work ethic rooted in generosity and thrift and helping our neighbors still live, or did COVID change it forever? And finally, what about the family? Are we more likely to lean into these institutions the next time we're in trouble? The panel will tackle these tough questions this morning, but they are equipped to do it. And I'll tell you, watching the news coverage over the past 24, 48 hours on COVID, there's pretty dark coverage. It's all negative. It's all taking people back to a dark place and saying, stay there, dwell on it, wasn't it terrible? The Christian is able to look at these circumstances very differently because you can see what was God doing during a trial. What was He doing in your own life? So I thought what would be helpful this morning is to look back and say, did we learn anything? Is there anything that we learned about this that helps us for the next time? And I'm sure after World War I, people thought there wouldn't be a World War II. There wouldn't be a Korean War. There wouldn't be Vietnam. There wouldn't be these great periods of uncertainty. But there were, so there will be challenges. Cynthia, when you came out of COVID, did you have time at all to journal, to reflect, to write down a few thoughts and say, okay, here's where we are?
Yeah, and I've said this time and time again. I have both ends of the spectrum. I lost my mother, but my kids were at home full time. My son was a 2020 grad, so he had none of the last sort of semester of his high school.
Right.
Yeah, but we were all together. We were all together a lot of times without phones. We were all together playing some games in the evening. In the shutdown, I think, in the darkest of times, there was some light at the end of the tunnel. I heard on a regular basis people say, you know, it's nice not to get up in the morning and hear the car horns and people didn't travel as much, you know, even down to, you know, the air was cleaner, things like that. So there were some positives.
Sure.
I know from our church's perspective, we, for the first time ever, not just our church, but, you know, the world of churches went online.
Right.
That was almost unheard of. It provided an outlet for people to worship.
And we didn't take the cameras out after church.
No.
So let's talk about faith in particular. You know, you were from cradle all the way till today, church attending, church goer, go to church every Sunday and whenever the church doors were open. But then COVID happens. What did it do to you? And did it change the way you experience worship, experience God?
Yeah. I don't know if anyone wants to hear this story. But
want to hear it.
Okay, no. So right before COVID, we went to a very, very large church for a long time and loved it. But then we made a switch and we started going to a house church, which was an amazing kind of change of pace, because it went from, a big thing with all of these people and kind of a movement into something really kind of personal, where we got to know each other and we spent all day on Sunday together. And then right as COVID hit, that got stripped away because the family, who are wonderful people, didn't want to have people in their house anymore. Yeah. And so that was a shock. And so it did kind of force us into I guess we're not going to go back to the huge church because they're shut down. We can't go here anymore. So it was kind of like a flailing period of just like, well, where are we going? It's not like the faith is gone. It's just that the church is gone, And so, I mean, it was probably a year and a half of trying to figure out what to do, where to go, and all of that.
So do you go back to big church after COVID? Did you stay at the small church? What did you do?
Medium. We probably swung back to the middle. I think it for me personally, it disillusioned me to the internet, though. That was the big thing, was like everyone was like, oh my gosh, it's so cool. Like, I think before COVID, it was like, man, Zoom meetings, they're kind of cool. Like, look at this tech. Afterwards, it's like, I never want to look at my computer again,
Interesting.
Or, man, live stream's so cool. It's like, I never want to live stream another church service as long as I live. And I'm a filmmaker,
Yeah, right. What was it difficult to pastor people on a screen?
Yes, it was absolutely one of the most difficult things I think the church has been challenged to do in a long, long time. I think what we discovered was that it revealed a significant flaw in who we are as Christians, especially in the Western world, and that is the assumption that just because you come to church, that you have a discipleship level that will handle the crisis of life.
What do you mean by discipleship?
Well, and Luke kind of hit on that, like, what do I do now question. Was really a hard one for people to answer if they weren't in the Word every day, if they weren't in a discipleship process where they had daily devotions and they were grounded and strong and had a deep faith.
Daily.
Right. Yeah. Right. Do I believe God is still on the throne? Do I trust? Do I have that sense, or do I just go for an hour on Sunday? Which and I think it revealed, especially in mainline churches. I think it was really prominent there, that we had not done a really good job of giving people the grounding they needed to walk through a crisis.
Because fewer of those have small groups.
Correct.
All right, so let's talk about institutions. So the things that we learned a lot about ourselves as neighbors. I mean, people like, I didn't realize that guy played the trombone or the ukulele because they're out on their porch playing a concert for us.
Right.
Well, they didn't stop.
Right, so at some point, everything gets shaken up and we get very creative about relationships. What have you seen that has survived from COVID that's making community good and the places that we live special?
I don't know. I go back to the internet thing. I think it splintered society into two factions. One got really, really, really addicted to the internet, and the other one got fed up with it. And so I think you kind of find your group either way.
It's the go play outside group and the screens.
And I think both groups are scrolling themselves to death.
Right.
But it's just that the one group kind of hates, like, self-loathes for it, and the other group is like, I don't know what else to do.
By the way, none of our viewers are scrolling right now. They're watching intently. They're not scrolling and watching. Yeah,
totally.
This is a very smart group.
They're holding newspapers.
That's
just the demographic.
That's right.
It's just,
What about you, Cynthia?
I would agree. It's just a tough place to be. I mean, that is sort of the overriding difficulty of how we move forward in life, post-COVID or not, I think. I don't know. I mean, we live in a pretty small neighborhood, and we enjoyed being outside and trying to make things work. And I was, I hate to say I went against the grain a little bit, but I didn't mind moving closer to people, and I didn't. Right. I mean, I did it safely, and I made sure that people were okay with it. But it was nothing to be like, listen, I've got some extra chicken, I'm going to drop it off. And so, the post-COVID piece is then how do you continue those relationships?
But you're a hugger. I've seen you hug a lot of people, so
yeah.
that's got to be really hard.
I mean, and that was hard,
Yeah.
but I think the question is how do we maintain those relationships that we sort of are newly formed, to make sure that they still know, we may not be in crisis now, but we are here for you, we support you,
Okay, so going into the next crisis, whatever that is, and you look at the world scene, you can imagine a crisis, but we shouldn't dwell on the anxiety of it, but something's going to happen. The institutions, family, church, our community organizations, are we ready?
No. That's the short answer. The short answer for me is I do not. I don't believe. I believe we keep ourselves in this frame of mind that we're fine. It's going to be fine. All is well. And I don't know that. Not that I would say let's go all the way over to let's prepare for the zombie apocalypse.
Right.
Let's all dig
Because there are people that are digging in their backyards right now.
Exactly. Let's
have
don't
to
need
read
to.
the newspaper.
We don't need to go there.
We're not making fun of those people.
Right.
I'm just saying. That's right, because I'm a newspaper person.
Right. But by the same token, I don't think we should do the opposite end of that spectrum as well and say that all is well, well. I think what we should be doing is we should be strengthening people for the journey, no matter what the journey looks like.
Okay, give us a pastoral close here then today.
Sure.
If you're across from somebody who's very anxious today and feeling like, I don't even want to think about COVID because that brings up so many bad memories. Right. What do you tell them about God, His reliability, and how they should engage with Him?
Right. I am thoroughly convinced that one of the things that we need to be doing as believers is strengthening our relationship with Jesus in such a way that we are transformed permanently so that we can walk through any journey that comes along. Because the reality is, we're talking about cancer today. Cancer is hitting people, and it completely undoes you. And it undoes your family. And
the big COVID.
Right, and so there are you're right, there are going to be things that are going to undo us. Are we going to allow those things to undo us, or are we going to dive deeper into our relationship with Jesus and let Him walk with us through those moments?
Okay.
No matter what.
Good advice.
No matter what.
No matter what.
Right.
Thank you all very much. This was hopeful today. Well, do you know the warning signs and symptoms of colon cancer? This is the second deadliest cancer in the United States, but preventable. In honor of Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month, Deborah talks with a doctor to discuss ways of lowering your risk. You're watching Morning Light on Lighthouse TV.
Colorectal cancer is the second leading cause of cancer-related deaths. Statistics show that each year about 150,000 Americans are diagnosed with colorectal cancer. Overall, the lifetime risk of developing colorectal cancer is about 1 in 24 for men and 1 in 26 for women. And this cancer can be prevented with screening and is highly treatable when detected early. Joining me to talk about it is retired family and hospice physician, Dr. Jack Wright. So, doctor, what is colorectal cancer?
Well, colon cancer is a formation of a malignancy in the colon. The colon extends from the appendix over on your right side, all the way up like a picture frame, and then it becomes the sigmoid colon, and then the rectum, and it ends at the anus. So any kind of malignancy anywhere in that organ is colorectal cancer.
So what are some of the signs and symptoms?
It really depends on where the colon cancer starts. Unfortunately, a lot of times there are no signs and symptoms until it's pretty far advanced, particularly on the right side. The stool there is liquid, so those tumors don't tend to block very often, so you don't get obstruction. But they do tend to ulcerate and bleed more readily, so you can have dark stools. Sometimes those tumors, though, get so big they actually perforate, and then, of course, you have an emergency, and that's when they find out it's cancer. On the left side, the stool is more formed there, so those tumors don't have to get so big before they might cause an obstruction. They do bleed some, but not as much as the right side. The stool tends to be on the surface of the stool, and when they cause a partial obstruction, you get more cramping with trying to have a bowel movement. And then in the rectosigmoid, because that's a larger diameter area, more of a reservoir, the tumors can still get pretty big. They do tend to bleed. The red blood on the stool. And that's where you get the pencil-thin stools. Remember one of the 7 warning signs of cancer? Well, that's where that comes from. And sometimes you have to strain really hard to have a stool, so it would be a change in your bowel habits.
Yeah, so what are some of the risk factors?
Smoking is a big risk factor. Smoking is a risk factor for many types of cancers, and it is a risk factor for colon, and that includes tobacco and marijuana both, because the smoke from marijuana has the same carcinogens in it as tobacco. It's felt that diet perhaps is a cause. This is more controversial now. It used to be that red meats and nitrates cause cancer. They think it does that because bacteria metabolize some of the nitrites and create carcinogens. I think that's a little more controversial now. We're not really sure. And then diabetes can cause cancer, increase your risk, because the diabetes creates the formation of chemicals within the bowel to try to enhance glucose absorption, and that stimulates the lining of the colon to turn over more, to grow more, and that causes polyps. If you have a family history of polyps, that's quite significant, even just solitary polyps. And then there are hereditary familial type conditions, like one called familial polyposis. This is where they grow thousands of polyps in their colon, usually starting in their 20s. And by 40, they almost 100% chance of having a colon cancer. And inflammatory bowel disease like ulcerative colitis or Crohn's, they also have a very high risk of colon cancer.
So how can you prevent it? So we know the risk factors.
I would say try to decrease the red meats somewhat in your diet, particularly the processed red meats. I'm not saying to avoid it completely. Try to keep your diabetes under control, control your weight. Obese people also have a higher risk of colon cancer. If you have a family history of colon cancer, you definitely want to get screened. They have lowered the general screening age now from 50 to 45. And when I was in practice, I had patients in their 30s, and this was back in the 1990s, in their 30s that would present with colon cancer. So screening is important. And if you have any of the inheritable diseases or inflammatory bowel, you definitely need to be screened.
So yeah, definitely talk to your doctor about when is the appropriate time to get that colonoscopy.
Yes.
It's not that bad, but it's so important.
It's the kind of thing that you're glad when you've had it done.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had it done, so yes,
Yeah,
but it's important to go through. So if you receive a diagnosis that you do have, say, colon cancer, how can your faith really help you through? How do you help patients?
Well, I think it depends a lot on the stage of it, but if you say it's early and it hasn't metastasized, you say, well, this is a warning call from God that you won't be here on earth forever. So what is your relationship with Him? There are treatments, and that can be hard to go through sometimes, the chemotherapy and the surgery, but again, your faith can get you through that. And then at the end, if it is a terminal diagnosis and you are going to die from your colon cancer at some point, well, when that trial occurs and you don't have any other way to turn, you need to turn to your Heavenly Father. So as a Christian physician, I would inquire about their faith and how can we help you with that? How can we help your family see that there is another side to this life and you won't have colon cancer on that side. But in the meantime, how can we help you with your faith through that?
Thank you so much for talking to us about this very important topic.
It is important, yes, thank you.
Adults between the ages of 45 to 75 should be screened for colorectal cancer. It is important to talk to your doctor about when to start screening. Now, coming up next on Morning Light, listen to your body. That is the advice from a Pennsylvania man diagnosed with colorectal cancer at age 31. He will share his health journey and how that strengthened his faith. We're back in 1 minute. Welcome back. The average age of a person diagnosed with colorectal cancer is 70. But a Pennsylvania filmmaker received the devastating news when he was 31 years old. Joining me to share how this health battle strengthened his faith is Derek Dienner. Thank you for being with us.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here this morning.
Why don't you share your journey with us? You were diagnosed at 31.
Yeah, it's been 7.5 years since now that I was diagnosed at 31, out of nowhere, no family history, no cancer in my family. It was a crazy kind of slapped me across the face a little bit. So I had blood in my stool, I had irritable bowels, I had different things going on. I just thought maybe stress, family, life, owning a business, all these things. And my sister-in-law is a doctor, and she's like, you need to get checked, you need to go get screened, figure this out. You shouldn't mess around with blood. And so I ended up getting a colonoscopy, as the doctor said earlier, getting screened cancer early, early detection is a huge, huge fighter against cancer. It's the best way to fight it. And so I just faced it and got checked, got a colonoscopy, and when I came out, after the colonoscopy, you're kind of groggy. I saw the doctor come in, and he was looking at my wife and I, and I could just tell in that moment that it wasn't going to be good news. Just the way that he was looking at us and the way he was kind of coming into the room. So he told me that I had a tumor in my sigmoid colon. He didn't know the diagnosis yet in terms of, the staging, what was next. All he knew was it was in my sigmoid colon. He said, listen, the positive news that where it's at in your colon is probably the best place for it to be. That, we'll start looking at treatments, but you have to get a CAT scan, see what's going on. And, that was an intense moment, just getting that news. You never want to be getting that news.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, your reaction.
Yeah, I mean, I was shocked. You're getting over kind of the propofol, light anesthesia that you're on.
Right.
And just wait, did I hear that right? Did I just hear I have cancer? And looked over at my wife, and she was shocked. Her face was just blank, and then tears started streaming down her face. Wow. She was diagnosed, or her dad was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and she lost her dad when she was 18. So she's like, oh man, am I gonna lose my husband now? And we didn't know at that point what the journey was going to be, if it was treatable, if it was terminal, what it was. So there's just a lot of questions in that moment of what's next. And you see your family and my kids flashing before my eyes. Just all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I'm mortal,
That's right. How did your faith help you through this?
Yeah, I mean, instantly when you go through those moments, I even get the chills thinking about it. I just felt closer to God. I didn't, when you're 31, you're not thinking about your mortality. You're not thinking about what's next when you pass. You're just thinking about life and the obstacles. I have my own company. I'm an entrepreneur and have 2 kids, and thinking about how to be a better dad, a better husband, and run my company. And so it was just a challenge, to figure that all out. But I honestly, just having my faith in God and going through it with Him, I never felt closer. That whole year going through all those things was the closest that I've been to God, and I really feel like I revisit that feeling to kind of get back in the groove of man, life is short, and where am I going next, and what's going to happen. But I was given a treatable diagnosis. Eventually I got the CAT scan and had stage 3B colorectal cancer, so I was able to get surgery and chemo and go through all that. And so thankfully I was given a good diagnosis.
And you're doing well.
Yeah.
We mentioned that you're a filmmaker, and
Yeah.
you recently produced the film Brave the Dark, Lancaster-based.
Yeah, no, I'm doing well. This whole cancer journey kind of put me in a place of man, life is short. Go after what you believe to be true. Go after the goals and the dreams that you have. So as a business owner, the Brave the Dark journey has been incredible, and being able to use my gifts to be part of that team and get that story out to the world. So, it's just been a blessing to be on the other side of my cancer diagnosis, and I'm really thankful that I had a curative surgery and thankful that God was able to get me through that.
What advice do you have for our viewers who are watching?
Man, it's so hard to deal with anything health related. You go so fast in your brain of oh my gosh, I have this thing, I'm gonna die next month if you start Googling it. But honestly, get checked if you have anything that's going on with your body that's abnormal. Even if you're 20 or 15 or 80, whatever it is, be your own health advocate. If their doctor's not understanding what you're dealing with, keep pushing, keep trying to find someone that will listen and help. But be your own advocate, and that's important because, man, you're the only one that knows what you're experiencing. And get checked, try to figure out exactly what's going on, and early detection saved my life.
Derek, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us, and so glad you're doing so well.
Thank you.
And as Derek said, listen to your body. Check with your doctor if something is not right. Early detection is key. Stay with us. We are back right after the break. Welcome back. Coming up tomorrow on Morning Light, we will introduce you to Kingdom Quest Ministries. This ministry seeks to make disciples who will have an impact where they live through teaching and mentoring. And that's a look at what's coming up tomorrow on Morning Light. Now, Jeff, your closing thoughts.
Thank you, Deborah. Well, every now and then it's good to look back at the hard things we've come through, not too long and not too often, but the periods of uncertainty and challenge, like the pandemic, that interrupted our lives 5 years ago are important footnotes in our own timeline. Personal failures, tragedies, and moments when fears are drowned out all the hope. God uses all of them as milestones to remind us of His faithfulness. When we're unloving, unkind, unforgiving, He loved us perfectly. When we let people down, He never left. He was perfectly consistent, right by our side. When we look back at the life journey, our own life journey, there's a zigzag pattern of potholes, but also people positioned at every one of those junctures to help, encourage, to lift us up. Today we remembered COVID-19, but it's just another reminder that even in a world broken by viruses and a host of challenges, He never failed us, not for a moment. In all of these trials, in all of these circumstances, we were never alone. For Deborah and the entire Morning Light team, I'm Jeff Coleman. Thank you for watching. Be sure to check on your neighbors today, and God willing, we'll look for you back here tomorrow morning.